to our meeting tonight. And Dr. Robin is joining us here tonight. And also, she would like to know kind of what grade level, what interest you have in the medical field, or if you've decided on a career path, or if you're still thinking about it. So if you could message her in the chat, you can either do it in group chat or direct chat about your interests and your interests, your career interests, and your current grade level. That'll be really helpful, and she can tailor her workshop to that particular topic.
And you will not hurt my feeling if you don't want to be a doctor, because both of my kids very much do not want to be doctors. So it's totally fine. My son is currently in a pre-professional ballet program, which is about as far from being a doctor as you can get. And my younger child is planning on hopefully a Bachelor of Music and wants to play in an orchestra. So definitely a very different path for each of them, and not my path. But you each have your own path too. And that's, if you get one thing out of it today is you have to find the right path for you. And that can be hard to do. But it's part of life, and it changes too. There's a lot of adulthood in life. I was surprised how many years I had to be a grown-up and still have to be. So you might change your mind over time. All right, let's see here. I won't read things completely out loud, just kind of seeing. We have biology, possible pediatrician, physics, research. Excellent. And a parent, welcome parent. uh, Surgery fun.
All
Yeah,
right.
surgery was one of my favorite rotations, but of course not what I chose for a career.
And to all of you who are joining us, today we're joined by Dr. Robin Dickinson, and she would like to know a little bit about all of you. So if you could politely message her in the chat, telling her maybe what grade you're in and what career interests you have. Not necessarily a doctor, but if you would like to be a doctor or something in the medical field, for sure, share that with her so she can tailor the workshop towards your interests.
And if not, let me know also, because even if you don't want to be a doctor, the path is kind of the same for everyone in some ways, which is, you know, develop your career skills, develop your communication skills, your people skills, all these. I mean, that's why you're here, right? You didn't come here because you didn't want to develop that. So, excellent. Oh, computers. I have a lot of computer people in my family. Also, one of my brothers is going into computer engineering, and one of my brothers is an electrical engineer. So all of those are great paths. There is nothing wrong with any of the paths, so long as you're doing what's right for you. Research fun. Excellent. Okay. So I think it looks like the people have stopped trickling in mostly, so I should go ahead and start. Is that good, Caleb?
So I'll just do a quick little introduction. So hello everyone, I hope you're doing well and ready for another exciting meeting at the Future Leaders Gavel Club. My name is Caleb Van Brunt. It is an honor to be your club president, and I would like to officially call this meeting to order. The Future Leaders Gavel Club is a Toastmasters club open to middle school and high school students, and I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is here with us today, including our guests, and we sincerely hope you enjoy and learn from this experience. We are a Toastmasters club in which members are empowered to develop communication and leadership skills, resulting in greater self-confidence and personal growth. And we meet every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is 8 to 9 p.m. Central Time. And tonight is extra special because it's our final meeting of the year until we take a 2-week break to resume on January 8th, 2025. And we are excited to have a workshop led by Dr. Robin Dickinson. So Dr. Robin Dickinson is a board-certified family physician and innovative medical educator. For several years, she served as a sole physician in a clinic caring for families without access to medical care and founded the region's first free clinic. Family needs during the pandemic caused her to pivot her career path, and instead of viewing this as the end of her medical career, this opportunity allowed her to magnify her impact by nurturing aspiring medical professionals from diverse communities. Through her innovative online curriculum, Dr. Dickinson has reached nearly 3,000 students globally, many of them from underserved backgrounds. And recognizing the need for a diverse physician workforce that reflects the communities that it serves, she focuses on engaging students as early as late elementary and middle school, an age that is often overlooked by existing programs. Her talent for simplifying complex medical concepts makes her uniquely equipped to connect with younger learners. So please help me welcome Dr. Robin Dickinson as he shares her insights and expertise with us tonight. Dr. Dickinson, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I'm so delighted to be here. Just a little tip. You hear people introduce like that, it sounds all fancy and stuff. As you get older, you just accidentally start accumulating things because you do stuff, because either you do stuff or you don't, right? And so if you keep doing stuff, pretty soon you get this really long introduction. You guys got kind of the short version. There are times I get like a 10-minute introduction for all the things. And that doesn't mean that like someone is a really scary person. It doesn't mean that they're a really important person either. Sometimes they just lived a long time and kept doing things. And so you can add it up over time. So don't ever be intimidated by those introductions. You are all going to end up with so many things in your introduction someday too that I listen to these and I'm like, who are they talking about? Oh, it's me. Huh, I guess I did do all that. How did that happen? So just keep living your life and doing cool stuff or fun stuff or interesting stuff or things you don't like. Sometimes that happens too. It's fine. You don't have to love everything. Sometimes you drag yourself through things and that's okay too. But mostly, hopefully you do things that are interesting and fun for you. So I have some slides. You'll see I don't have a ton of words on them because I really don't want you guys to have any sort of death by power. Oops, I gave you the wrong one. Hang on. I have, I'm going to, because you're Toastmasters, I'm going to show you the behind the scenes stuff here. I have two screens. So right over there is the one you guys are going to see. And I think I shared with you, there we go, the one that I'm supposed to see. So you guys have the pretty one. I have the one in front of me. And then I can also still see all of you because I can pull you up on my screen so that I can see if you look bored, if your eyes are glazing over, if anyone is playing with sharp objects while I'm talking. But you're all old enough not to do that. But Caleb has been in some of my classes where there have been younger children who do crazy stuff. So I'm so glad that all of you can be trusted not to hurt yourselves. All right, so I don't like a ton of slides. I don't like a ton of word on slides. You'll be reading it instead of me, listening to me. So there won't be a ton on there. But I did want to show you a few little odds and ends here that I want to make sure really get driven home. So one of it, you're going to use these skills no matter what. So you don't want to be a doctor? Totally fine. You're going to need these same skills. These are kind of like life skills and they're like life career skills. And hopefully it's going to be different than what other people are telling you. The other thing I just want to point out, if you don't know what you're going to do next, just start saying yes to things and see what happens. That's what I've done in like my whole life. And my whole career. But anytime an opportunity came up, I'd be like, sure, I'll do that. And it's ended up being a lot of things that maybe aren't normal for someone in my career path to do. I've learned how to design costumes and I've done history, living history. I actually met my husband doing living history, wearing full historic costume. So I'm really glad I did that, even though that was not part of my career path, because otherwise I wouldn't have my husband and kids. So that worked out really well for me. So just say yes to things and then see what clicks. And you have to be willing to say no to things as part of saying yes to things, because you have to say no to a lot of wrong things before you get the right thing sometimes, and that's okay. But that's the general stuff. So for today, here's some stuff about medical. I'm a doctor, obviously. I'm a family physician. But I want you to remember there's all these careers no one ever told me about. So when I was in school, there was like doctor, lawyer, engineer, teacher. There were like a limited number of jobs. And I saw people also saying research, which is great. A lot of people don't realize research exists. But I know a lot of you probably have parents who do research or you know people who do research. So that opens that up to you. But just to know there's all these other jobs too. Being a doctor is great. Medical school is fine. It's not for the faint of heart, but there's lots of other options too. So I kind of put like under doctor, you can become primary care, which is like me. You can become a medical specialty. So that could be like a pulmonologist who takes care of lungs. You could become a pediatrician who takes care of kids. I'm a family physician. I take care of everything because I'm very random and I'm not happy doing just one thing. I loved every rotation for like 3 weeks during medical school. And then I got bored because I was like, all we're going to do is surgery for like this whole time. All we're going to do is take care of old people. All we're going to do is take care of kids. All we're going to do is hearts. All we're going to do is like, I liked all of it. So I just kept wanting to do all of it. Not everyone's that way. We need people who like certain things and we need people who like everything. Surgical specialties, you do surgery. And then academics is a little bit different. I didn't know that existed. Some of you might already, but teaching, which is kind of how I ended up by accident, was teaching at a medical school. And then turns out you guys are way more fun, people in middle school and high school than medical students who are totally stressed out. And teaching people before they have learned to stop thinking is also way more fun. A lot of people by medical school are just memorizing, memorizing, memorizing. And I really like people to be thinking and questioning still. So that's why I mostly focus on a younger audience. Um, Oops, thank you. I switched it on one slide, not the other. That's the danger of two. Thank you. I appreciate the message. See, behind the scenes, change both slides if you have one in front of you you're reading and one that you're showing. That's the nice one. You can be a nurse anesthetist, speech therapist, radiology tech, geneticist, or other kinds of direct patient care, right? So those are things where we're working directly with patients and you aren't a doctor. And personally, I probably would have been a speech therapist if I knew that existed, which sounds completely opposite from family medicine, and in many ways it is. But I really think what they do is interesting and fun and cool. But all of this is important and new, a lot of it's very, very new, cutting edge. Geneticists, of course, genetics has a lot going on. And then clinical laboratories, research laboratories. Clinical laboratories, you take care of clinical stuff. Research laboratories, you take care of research stuff. Public health, you take care of public health, which you all have lived through the pandemic, and you know how absolutely critical that is for like everything. And then, of course, there's whatever it is I do now, which is teaching people of all ages about how the human body works, which is my favorite thing because I think the human body is super cool. So my own path to get here was that when I was 6, I was at my doctor's office and I noticed that the nurse had like nice clothes, she had a career, she was talking to people about like all these fun things she could do on the weekend. I was like, I want her lifestyle. And then I was noticing she was like helping people and taking care of people. I was like, and I want to do what she's doing. But there were some things I didn't like too. So when I got in the car, I told my mom that I wanted to be a nurse when I grew up, but I didn't want to take care of pee, poop, or blood. And she was like, well, how about you become a doctor and your nurse will take care of that for you? Which turned out to not be entirely true. And every time that I was working in the hospital and ended up like drenched in something gross, I would tell that story to the nurses and they would all laugh as they like laid out towels for me to walk to the shower to go get cleaned up. So you aren't entirely free of, of yuck when you're a doctor. Some people are. I tend to be someone who gets in the middle of everything. So I got messy anyways. But that put it in my head. At the time, this was in the dark ages, only about 15% of doctors were female. 15% female, 85% male. And my mom said, you could be a doctor. And after that, I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. And a lot of people change their mind. And if you guys change your mind, that's totally fine. But if you don't change your mind, that's totally fine too. All the way along, people kept saying, oh, you're going to change your mind. You're not going to want, you're going to, well, guess what? I did not change my mind. So if someone tells you you're going to change your mind, I think that's super obnoxious. If someone says that you can't change your mind, that's not true either. You can totally change your mind. What I say is you do what's right for you. And who you are later might be different than who you are now. Or once you learn about other careers, you might be like, whoa, turns out that's actually much, much better for me. And in that case, go do that. But in the meantime, here are some skills that everyone would benefit from, especially if you're going to be a doctor, but not just if you're going to be a doctor. So as we say doctor's path, I'm going to just real quick say there's a lot of education involved, right? But to get through that education and do well with it, there are certain skills you need, right? You all are here learning some of those skills. Public speaking, part of being a doctor. So it's a good thing you all know how to talk. But there's a lot of other things people don't think about. So I'm going to talk some more about those. The basic path, you go to high school, you go to college, you go to, that's 4 years-ish, maybe more if you do research. 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, unless you do your MD, PhD, which means you become both a medical doctor and a PhD doctor, in which case it's 6 years. And then you do residency, which is minimum of 3 years, but can be quite a bit more. And then you do a fellowship if you feel like it. You don't have to know what all these are, but basically minimum 11 years after high school to become what I am, which is a family physician, having not done any research because I liked talking to people more and doing volunteer work and stuff like that, which is totally fine if you like research. We need research really badly. It's just not my thing. I did not do a fellowship. I just went straight through. I went straight from high school straight into medical school. Got in the first try, which is not typical. So if you don't get in the first time, that's totally fine. My best friend in medical school tried 7 times before he got in, which I would have given up before then. So kudos to him for sticking with it. And the funny thing now is I am a family physician and he, which is kind of like the low end doctor. Um, and he is now one of the most highly trained pulmonologists in the country who went to all these ooh la la things. And he had to try 7 times to get into medical school. So here is how you get into medical school or master's degree programs or college or anything, right? So these are things you all know about. I have to mention this to you because it's standard. You have to get good grades, right? That shows that you're able to start projects, you're able to do strategy, you're able to plan on your own, you're able to get all this stuff done, right? Oops, and you know what? Some of these slides I didn't change, Sorry, I did change it. I must have not saved it. Okay, look guys, you get to see behind the curtain again. Ignore the small print. I didn't save what I put there. Test taking skills. You need to do well in tests even if you don't know material. I have taken tests where I did not know the material at all and still did really well because tests are kind of cheatable. Not cheatable, learnable. Don't ever cheat. Learn, study, but there comes a point where you cannot learn all the material. You need to be a leader, right? Be able to motivate a team, get a goal done. Volunteerism is not thinking outside the box. You need to be willing to give to people, right? It also just looks good on your record. I don't want to say you should always be doing things just to look good, but looking good does not help. And I'm sure some of you are here right now because it looks good, and that's okay. Like, that's not a bad thing to do something that looks good. You need to be productive. You need to be able to be efficient, get things done, because otherwise you're going to waste a lot of time and you need to work hard, right? But let me go to the real stuff, which hopefully that slide I saved the changes to. So for the next one, this is what we're going to talk about for the rest of it. So I'm going to go through slowly here. Communication, I'm going to kind of skip. You guys know about that because you're here. You wouldn't be here if you didn't think communication was important. And you are already learning all the time how important it is to be able to communicate clearly, get people's attention, help people understand. This is going to be skipping right over to self-care because that is the second thing I want to talk to you about. Self-care is super important and maybe not something you know about yet. I didn't know about it yet because when you need or when you're able to do all this other stuff, it's because you're taking care of yourself, right? On this slide, I have buckets. And a lot of people are like, why do you show buckets of water for self-care? Well, because you have two things happening with your bucket of self-care. You have what you're putting in and you have what's coming out. And a lot of people only think about putting in self-care. They're like, well, I shower and I sleep and I eat healthy food and I exercise. I check the boxes. But you also have to think about what's going out. What is it you're using up and is it worth your time? Sometimes, yes, it is. And sometimes, no, it's not. So if you're doing something that is draining you, if you notice it exhausts you all the time, ask yourself why it's draining you and why you're doing it. So part of self-care is setting these boundaries around what you're doing to make sure that what you're doing is valuable to you. Now, valuable can mean different things. It is okay if valuable means you're doing it because you have to. If your parents are making you, if your job is making you, if that's the step you have to take to get to the thing you actually want, it's okay to be like, I want to get to that, and to do that, I have to do this, and I don't like this. That happens sometimes in life. If you can skip that, great. If you can't, that's totally fine. But is there a way to do it that doesn't completely drain you? Sometimes we give our heart and soul to things that we don't need to. We can just check the box. And sometimes we should be giving our heart and soul because it wouldn't drain us so much if we actually cared. So that's the first thing. Give yourself some self-care. If you are not doing well at self-care right now because you have all these things due, you have tests, you have exams, you have papers, you have responsibilities, you have your volunteer work, you have family obligations, it doesn't change. Like, you're not going to suddenly arrive in some place where you have time to take care of yourself. So you have to start figuring out how to do it now. Now, I know it's a little bit harder when you're in middle school and high school because you have a lot of adults telling you what you should be doing all the time. And also when you're an adult, you have your kids telling you what you should be doing all the time because you have to like drive them places and stuff. And then you have your boss telling you what to do because they want stuff out of you. And then you have your spouse, your partner, whoever, they want things. So it turns out that it kind of comes out the same in the end, except I get to eat ice cream whenever I want. And you guys probably don't, but I do. So there's little benefits to being an adult. But nobody's going to let you take care of yourself. Nobody's going to tell you you can now go take care of yourself. So start figuring out little ways. My odd little quirky way that I learned from my pediatrician, actually, my doctor when I was a kid, she said, if you're going to be a doctor, you need to learn how to knit, which to a kid in the 80s sounded like someone saying, oh, you're going to be a doctor, you need to go learn how to do this obscure macrame thing that old ladies do, and it will get you through being a doctor. And I was like, you want me to do what? People don't knit. Nobody except old ladies knit. Nowadays, knitting's cool, but it was not back then. And so my mom decided that I had to learn to knit because my doctor said so. So I went to the senior center, and Edna taught me how to knit. And it turns out my doctor was right. Now, you do not have to learn how to knit. That is not something that I think everyone has to do, but you need some little things that are yours that you can do no matter what. And I think that's what she meant, but maybe didn't explain, is you need some things that are your little outlet. Maybe you draw. Maybe you draw anime. Maybe you draw beautiful flowers. Maybe you paint. Maybe you play music. Now, if it's something you're doing because you have to, or it's something you're doing competitively, or you're trying to get somewhere, that's not for you. I mean, it is for you, but you need something that's for no reason at all that will help you relax. Things like that. Nobody's going to give you that. Next off, this looks a little bit odd, manual dexterity. Nobody thinks about manual dexterity for doctors. No one ever thinks like, oh, a future doctor should learn to decorate cakes or whittle or knit for that matter. But actually, as a doctor, I have taught so many medical students who obviously have never used their hands to do anything useful. And then they want to go be a surgeon. And I'm like, you can't sew, you can't do anything. And I hand them instruments and they're like trying to figure, they look like toddlers being handed things because medical instruments are weird. You have to do weird stuff with them. They don't work the same way. And you have to have like multiple things. Like when you're doing surgery, you hold instruments in multiple fingers and switch between them in this little like magical flippy way. Or even just looking in someone's ear, you have to put your hand against their head and then hold and then maneuver like this while you're holding onto their head with your hand like that. It's not the easiest thing in the world. It looks easy because there's a lot of practice involved. But if someone has never done any of these things in this picture or anything else either, playing an instrument, artwork, crafts, handwork, woodworking, plumbing, whatever, but you need to know how to use your hands. So cool thing is you can do this as a way to be ready to be a doctor or an electrical engineer. My brother found the same thing. He went to School of Mines, which is a big engineering school in Colorado where I live. And at School of Mines, he discovered that like in our house growing up, we were all expected to do like all sorts of stuff like this. So he grew up cake decorating and he knew how to knit. He knew how to do everything that I knew how to do basically, because once any of us learned something, kind of everyone else, there were 6 of us, everyone else was kind of expected to learn it too. And then also no one repaired our bikes for us. So I figured out how and taught all my siblings. I was the oldest. So like all this hands-on stuff and also the boys. So my sister and I, and then 4 brothers. The boys liked taking things apart. So my mom would just buy electronics at like the thrift store and they would just completely dismantle it when they were like 3 and 4 years old. And then as they got bigger, they'd put it together and use it to like split water to make oxygen and hydrogen and set fire to things, and which my mom didn't know about that part. But we did all this stuff. And then he got to School of Mines and most of them had never done anything with their hands. And so in the robotics course, they were struggling a bit because they were like, they can't do things to build a robot, or they were trying to like create these new inventions basically as part of being an electrical engineer is like, how can I set up this device that does something interesting? They couldn't figure out how to put it together. There's a lot of screws involved. There's a lot of like building casings for things and they couldn't do it. And so he ended up becoming a teacher's assistant there, loved what he did, and actually a number of his students went to his wedding a couple weeks ago, which was really fun. So I got to meet his students from his teacher aiding days. Now he's just working as an engineer, which is more financially successful, less fun, I guess, than the working with students. Next thing. Oh, by the way, you'll be able to ask all your questions here in just a couple minutes, so feel free to jot them down. I should have said that at the beginning. But there's definitely a big Q&A portion. Most of my classes, it's questions all the whole time, and so I keep almost saying, anyone have any questions? Raise your hand, thumbs up, thumbs down, but I'm focusing. So do save your questions, because I will be asking in a moment. Next thing is creative problem solving. So I don't care what kind of problems you solve. For picture's sake, I showed like physical things, right? So being part of a robotics team or being part of a scout troop or whatever, that's great. But it can also be solving problems in here. Maybe you're trying to solve societal problems. Maybe you're trying to solve homelessness or hunger. Maybe you're trying to solve problems for your own family. don't ever discount what you do for your real life too. One reason I got into medical school first try, and one reason I got so many scholarships for college and things like that, is I told them about what I did for my family because I grew up in a lower income family, oldest of six kids. Um, I kind of made a lot of my own way in the world, and with, help from my mom, obviously, but a whole lot of having to kind of figure things out and then helping out my family along the way. I lived at home all the way through college so I could help my family, which I'm not suggesting to anyone here. It's very hard to keep your grades up and take care of family. Focusing on yourself is a good idea, but I used that when I talked about things, not in like in a weird, creepy, like used it kind of way, but like told people about it. I was like, this is something I learned from. This is a problem I solved. And that helps you later as you're a doctor to solve bigger problems like life or death problems. Or if you're an engineer, or if you're a computer person, or if you're a chemist, or if you're a researcher, whatever. That's a great thing to do. Two more really important ones, then we're gonna be all done. Okay with failure. Failure happens. And if you don't fail, you're not trying enough different things. And that was probably really hard for a lot of you to hear. If you're here, you are not so into failure, right? I am not so into failure either, especially when I was younger. Over time, you get enough successes that the failures roll off a bit easier. But the reality is, if you do research, you might never find what you're looking for. You might never have a successful experiment. That's miserable, but that's science. And it kind of works that way for everything. Like, I can't be a 100% perfect doctor. And I hate that. I would like to be 100% perfect. And when I wasn't 100% perfect, it was really hard not to beat myself up because, I mean, these are people's lives, right? And even now with teaching, I have a really hard time not being a perfectionist about it, even though it's not life or death anymore. Uh, but you also have to be okay that, like, sometimes class doesn't go how I want it to. No, nobody died, it's fine. And as a doctor, sometimes people die, and that has to be okay too. Engineers build things that fall down. Let's hope they don't. Most of the time they don't, but sometimes things happen, right? And if you don't have lots and lots of failures, you're not trying enough different things, and you're actually limiting your later success. That was really hard for me because I didn't really experience much in the way of failure until medical school. I've experienced a lot of challenges, but in general, I was like the I'm going to do everything perfect person. And then I got to medical school and I almost failed anatomy. And it was horrifying to me. I was like, how could I almost fail anatomy and I want to be a doctor? But it's because I was so used to one way of learning and one way of succeeding. And in medical school, you just can't do it that way, which is why I teach my classes the way I do, is uh, I grew up on memorizing as much as humanly possible, and that's not possible anymore. Once you get to a certain level, you have to think and remember, but it's hard to switch over. So yeah, that was a real awakening for me to realize like I can fail, and it doesn't change who I am. My identity is not someone who doesn't fail, and also it doesn't make me not a good doctor to have things go wrong. Now, of course, if you're a doctor and you hurt enough people, yes, you're not a good doctor, right? But you can't be perfect in every way all the time. All you can do is your best. And your best has to be pretty good if you're a doctor, but there's a lot of areas where you're going to have to fail. And one thing I learned as a medical student is you had to be willing to guess or to try and to not know the right answer or to say something stupid, because otherwise you just sat there with your mouth closed because there's no way you could be right when you're a student. When you're a student, you don't know. Medical students are expected to not know things. And it took me a while to figure that out. So be okay with failure. It's really good for you, which I know sounds hard, but it gets easier. It's still hard, and that's okay. And then finally, good relationships. We need other humans. And this is part of where being okay with failure is hard, and part of where self-care is hard, is humans need other humans. And so we're afraid of losing those other humans. Even if you don't think you're afraid of losing other humans, we're biologically wired to panic if there's any chance that we might lose our humans or get separated from them or be rejected by them. And so the reason we're afraid of failure is you go back thousands of years ago, if you messed up bad enough, your tribe might throw you out into the middle of the forest or the desert or wherever, and you're going to get eaten and die. And so even though we're not doing that anymore, you are not going to get thrown out into the middle of the forest if you get a bad grade on a test. It feels like you are, right? You're not actually going to die, but having someone be disappointed in you feels like you're going to die. At least for a lot of us. Maybe not for you, but for a lot of people. And taking care of ourselves kind of means setting boundaries around what other people want. Like sometimes I have to take care of me, which means I'm not taking care of my kids or my extended family or my dog or whatever. And that can be really hard to do too, is take care of myself because we do need other humans. Making sure you have those other humans though is so important. Sometimes we get so focused on our success and our school and our grades and our resume and CV is which is the doctor form of resume and all those things that we forget like, oh, there's people around here that I'm kind of fond of and I kind of want to be around and spend time with. And so making sure that you have that time and that it's healthy relationship time. Not just like, oh, we are all here and therefore we are in a relationship. Like really spend time with people you care about. Get to know them as people. Even people you don't like, if you get to know them as people, usually it's easier to like them. I've found that so far I've ended up liking everyone except one person I've ever met. Uh, which you don't have to know about the one person. Everyone else I've ever met, I like. Because once you get to know them, even if they seem really dreadful, it turns out they're just another human being, right? And so humans need other humans. Take care of those relationships because they take care of you. Make sure they're mutual relationships so you're not just giving, giving, giving. Don't let people walk all over you, but do have those relationships because you need them. So, those are my suggestions for your path, whether it's to be a doctor or whatever it is you're going to be doing with your life. It's not necessarily what you can hear from everyone else. No one's probably going to tell you like go get a hobby and play with things with your fingers, but do do go do that stuff. Probably a lot of people tell you have good relationships. That's kind of a standard important. And you're going to hear other things from other people. Listen, they're telling you that because of their own experiences too. And you can then go pick and choose. You might say everything think that everything I said turned out to be a bunch of baloney in your life. Doesn't make any sense. Well, if after you've tried some of this, you decide it's nonsense, that's fine. But also listen to other people too. Try some of their suggestions because a lot of people have lived through a lot of things, and sometimes you're going to try things that's going to be a terrible idea. But if you don't try it, you don't know. So uh, that is my advice to you. I can send some of this over to Caleb afterwards if anyone wants the list. In case you weren't taking notes and later on you're like, oh, wait a second. I wonder what that thing was she was talking about. I can send my outline to Caleb. And otherwise, it is open for question and answer, and you can ask me anything. Caleb can tell you I will answer basically any question about anything and get off topic very easily, but then pull us back together again. So raise your virtual hand if you have a question. And Caleb, do you call on them or do I call on them?
You can call on them to unmute once they've raised their hand.
Okay, excellent. Which, by the way, you all know how to use Zoom. That is, you probably already know this so much better than a lot of adults. So way to go. Knowing how to stay muted is good. All right, so if you don't have a question that you want to say in front of other people, you may also put it in the chat. I understand not wanting to speak in front of everyone sometimes. I know this is a public speaking group, so you should probably get used to it. Go ahead, Stephen.
Hello, doctor. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunities and thank you so much for what you shared with us. And all of the candidates here most of them are high school students or middle school students. They are quite lucky to enjoy such a workshop from you. And of course, I'm older than all of these students. And my question is, so what is your hardest, with your experience, what is your hardest moment and how could you overcome that moment? And have you ever experienced some depression or something like that? Could you share a little bit with you?
Of
Please
course.
share something with us.
Of
Thank you so
course.
much, doctor. Thank you.
Yeah, those are great questions. Okay, so if I've ever been depressed and then my hardest moment and how to overcome, is that summary of the question? All right, so depression-wise, I'm gonna start with that. Yes, absolutely. For me, the hardest things for me were actually when I was so busy with medical school or residency, I didn't get time for what was important to me otherwise. And I think a lot of that could have been avoided if I had had someone tell me what I was telling you guys about like self-care and things like that. But in medical school and residency, you do what are called rotations, which is where you go kind of practice being a doctor. And during some of those, at the time I was training, we'd be working 30 or more hours straight. So that means you go to work in the morning, you work all day, you work all night, and then you work all morning the next day and go home after lunch, or sometimes a little bit after that. And it was possible you might sleep during that time. But there's a saying in medicine, or there's the superstition that you're a white cloud or you're a black cloud. White clouds sleep at night, nothing bad happens, and black clouds learn a lot. And I was a black cloud. So everything terrible happened on my watch. And I started praying every night, please only send people who personally need me to take care of them. Otherwise, please save their terrible things for when someone else is here. And guess what? Apparently, everyone needed me because I saw so many things no one else got to, which is great for your education, but not great for your mental health. And I really struggled during those times. I didn't have time with my husband, with my extended family, with my pets, with my hobbies. So that's when I got really depressed. And as far as hardest time other than that, I'd say it was when a patient died because of a medicine that I prescribed. Now, it was not that I did the wrong thing and they died. It was that I did the right thing and they died anyway from the medicine I prescribed. And it devastated me, like completely. I had my own solo practice for 7 years before COVID. So these were my patients. I had like 450 patients who were my patients. They saw only me, mostly only saw me because they couldn't afford any of their care. Because my practice was set up for people who did not have access to medical care specifically. And I was just completely sobbed for days. I could hardly function. I'd pull myself together to like go to work, and then I could barely be there for my other patients. I was so devastated. And I'd come home and not be able to function at all, not be able to care for my kids. I would just sit there and cry, which makes sense. And also, I didn't do anything wrong. And sometimes people die, but I felt so personally responsible and it was so incredibly hard for me. And even now, I'm just like, oh, that was such a terrible time. And for both of those, depression or that particular situation was like the hardest thing I'd dealt with. Um, it's kind of the same formulas, not really formula, but one was reaching out for help. I needed help for sure. I ended up with a peer mentor in both situations. A peer mentor is someone who is similar to you and knows what you're going through and can support you. And for me, that was huge. In medical school residency, it was a peer mentor who was a medical school student or resident, or then as a doctor, it was a peer mentor who was another doctor who had a patient who died. In her case, she had actually messed up and it happened, which meant I ended up feeling like really bad that I didn't actually make a mistake. I couldn't even imagine in her case, it was something she'd actually messed up. But having someone else to talk to who really understood what I was going through and had been through it themselves made a huge difference. I also saw a therapist, and I talked to my doctor, and I talked to my husband, and I spent time with my pets. And I just had a lot of people I could reach out to and get help from and get treatment for things. And just like bringing it all together was so important. Journaling was really important. And then respecting myself enough to say, like, that is okay. Like, I don't have to be okay all the time. I am not God. I'm a human being. And being a human being happens, right? Like, if I were so perfect that I never messed up and was not in some way emotionally distraught by things that happen, would I actually be capable of being a good doctor? Because I wouldn't understand the human condition at that point. I wouldn't understand what it was like to go through things. And so it's okay for me to also be a human being and not be God. And, a lot of it was being okay with being imperfect. And a lot of it was being okay with missing things or not being there for people like in the middle of the night. Like sometimes I wanted to be there for a patient and I had to just be the doctor and walk out of the room and let someone else support them because I needed some sleep. And learning that I could have those boundaries and be a human being and not be perfect all the time was really hard, but also really, really important. So kind of answer that question. And hopefully for any of you who have bad things happen, they happen to everyone. You're not you're not at fault for bad things happening. You're a human being too. Even if you're the one who screws up, doctors mess up too sometimes. And it hurts, right? We don't want to. But, you're still a fine person and you're still a human being and you're worthy of love and you're worthy of family and friends and all those important things. Caleb, go ahead.
What kind of study tips and habits can we start developing in middle school and high school to prepare us for something like medical school?
Good. Study tips. Yeah. Okay, so study better, not more. Now, definitely study. Like some people can be like, oh, I don't have to study at all. No, that's not how that works. I still spend a lot of time studying. I am constantly studying and learning. And in some ways have to learn more teaching because especially the really littles, like the 7 and 8 and 9-year-olds, they ask questions I don't know the answer to because it never occurred to me to wonder that before. And so before I teach anything, I learn so much detail so that I can answer any question that comes up. And then I pre-teach it to one of my kids who tends to ask off the wall questions as practice, things like that. So I'm still always studying. It's part of keeping your brain young. I always say I'm not going to get dementia this way. So definitely do study, but you have to study smart, not just massive amounts. So that means having a study plan. Don't just like figure if you're there studying it counts. Like, yes, excellent. I'm glad you showed up. But having a plan is going to work a lot better for you, right? So decide, given the material I need to learn, what is the smartest way to learn this material? Sometimes that means doing flashcards. Sometimes that means writing things out. Sometimes that means practice tests. I actually, for the MCAT, the medical college admissions test, I went through one review book to make sure I'd reviewed everything, and then I just did a million practice tests. That's what I did to study. And every single thing I got wrong on the practice tests, I went and looked up. Because what that does is it engages your brain. You can't cram stuff in just by looking at it. You have to practice pulling it back out of your brain too. So the hardest part of learning something is not putting it in. It's being able to pull it out when you need to. And I'm sure all of you have had this happen, where you're like, it's right there on the page. I know where it is, and I can't think of the answer to this question. And it's so frustrating. So that's why you need to practice pulling information out of your head and putting it on the paper or the test or whatever way, way more than you practice putting it in. Putting it in is the easy part. Pulling it out is the hard part. So for my own studying, except for the MCAT medical college admissions test, I mostly just did a million practice tests, and I ended up doing extremely well, which is why I got in on my first try and ended up tutoring. I was offered a job teaching or tutoring people for the test, which I absolutely hated and did not do for very long, because teaching for a test is just not a happy job to have. If any of you enjoy it, go for it. It does pay well, I will say that. But it's something that, for me at least, it was just practicing. And it'll be different things for different things, right? Like if you're going to have to write things, practice writing. If you're going to have to do math, practice the math. Give yourself different problems for fun. I did that all the time, partly because I like math. But partly because if I wasn't 100% clear on a concept, I just gave myself more math and more math and more math and more math and more math. Physics killed me. I was not naturally good at physics. I gave myself excessive amounts of physics. I went for every tutoring session, every help session, and it was the subject I liked the least, and I spent the most time on it. Sometimes that's what you have to do. But it was not cramming it in, it was doing it. It was practicing it. So those are the big, come up with a plan. Also, stop and go to bed, you guys. I see people trying to study until like midnight. Your brain doesn't work anymore. Just stop. Just stop. It's better to go to bed and get some sleep and try again in the morning. Especially if you're feeling frantic and stressed, you're not putting anything in at that point. Just stop. Go to bed. And if you can't sleep, go listen to like a podcast with bedtime stories for grown-ups or something. So, Devin, go ahead.
So Dr. Robin, have you regret to be a doctor before? Like even for a minute, and why? For example, you tried your best but failed to save one of your patient or something?
For way more than 1 minute have I regretted being a doctor. Many times I regret being a doctor. At the same time, I've been more times glad that I was a doctor. So we all have regrets in life, and that's okay. Because if you don't have any regrets, it means you didn't try enough things, right? The big times I regret being a doctor. So when that one patient died, for a while there, I felt like I was incompetent to not be a doctor, and that was a little bit hard to dig out of. Most times when my patients died, I did not regret it being a doctor actually, because I knew I was there with them through that. And even though it was really hard, I could be a part of helping them through that. And I still remember specifically each of my patients who died. I went to a lot of funerals. That was very, very hard. But it did not make me regret being a doctor. I think the things that made me regret being a doctor were when I did not take care of myself and I was losing myself in it. and I was giving up everything for my patients or for my work, or like in the case of the patient who died and I could not get over, I was feeling like I was God and I should prevent it. And I was so not treating myself as well as I was treating my patients. I wanted for my patients everything, right? I wanted them to have the best lives possible. And I wasn't doing that for myself. And those, I think, are the big times where I started losing perspective, and not living according to my values. And those are the times I really regretted it. I've had a few times where I've questioned how much I gave up for it, because you do, like the rest of my friends were off having kids and big houses, and I was sleeping on a mattress on a floor in an apartment while still in school and still in training. And I had moments where I was like, they're like living a big grown up life, and I'm still in school 11 years later. Like, what's going on with me? Uh, or even like a few years ago at the beginning of COVID, when I was like, I just walked away from my practice. Why did I even become a doctor if I'm not using my education, if I don't even know what I'm going to be when I grow up and I'm 40? Like, I'm supposed to know what I want to be when I grow up now. But it turns out it all worked out fine in the end. I love what I do now, and I will always use that education. And I actually now have created way more doctors teaching than I ever could be myself. And they're helping way more people than I ever could. And now working with younger students, I have more impact. And actually, I teach students all over the world. Some of them have now gone to medical school because in Asia, they start medical school right after high school. I have multiple students I've taught in high school who are now in medical school. And so, yeah, I walked away from being a doctor myself in some ways, but now I'm creating like a lot of doctors. And so, and even people who don't become doctors are making better decisions for their health. I mean, the messages I get most often from parents is things like, you know, my child the other day told me I needed to eat more fiber because they learned all about this in your class. And so people are having better lives for the rest of their lives because of what they're learning from me now. And I'm preventing problems that hopefully no one's ever going to have to treat. So, yes, I can. I'm happy to discuss any other occupations. That's a question in the chat. You're welcome to ask anything. I know people with a lot of different jobs, and also I have mentored a lot of people in a lot of different directions. So ask questions about anything you want. William, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robin, for coming to our meeting tonight. So, as someone who does want to go into the medical field in the future, I'm wondering, what is your best advice for talking to patients in difficult cases, or if the patients themselves are the difficulties?
You know, we are all our own difficulty often. So this is true for everyone here. Hopefully, you are all in a situation at some point where you are talking to someone who themselves is difficult or is going through something difficult, because that means that you're spending time with human beings. And what I learned was to not tell them what to do. And oftentimes, doctors tell people what to do. But people probably already know what they should be doing, right? But shooting on people has never made them do anything. I mean, sure, maybe you can force yourself for a little bit to do something because you should, but mostly it's understanding. So I developed a motto a long, long time ago that if what someone is doing doesn't make sense, I don't have all the information. And so, yeah, people make really bad choices sometimes, it seems like, until you get all the information. You're like, okay, so in that situation, given their own personal experiences and their limitations and their education and their family situation and, whatever, that actually makes sense. Now, would I make the same decision? Probably not in every circumstance, but it makes sense on some level. And so I started just asking. And what pushed me to that was a patient who, it turns out, I was sent in just to be mean to me when I was a third year medical student, which when you first start seeing patients. And the team I was working with was like, you get to go see Mr. So-and-so. This is gonna be really funny, right? Like, they're gonna send in the newbie, see what happens. And apparently this guy just like chewed up and spit out medical students. He was just terrible. And they told me to go in and tell him to quit smoking. And he did smoke. And so I went in there, good little medical student. I've never smoked, I've never drunk, I've never done any of that, right? I've always been the straight A student. And I sat down with him and he said, I'll bet you were sent in here to tell me to quit smoking. And I was like, yes. And he said, have you ever smoked? And I said, no. And he said, do you know how hard it is to quit smoking? I said, no, I I don't know, but I've heard it's the hardest thing that most people have ever done. So I imagine it's harder than anything I've ever had to do. And he like stopped him because I wasn't telling him what to do. I was saying like what you're doing, and he said, "Well, yes." He said, "So what are you going to tell me now? You're going to tell me to quit?" And I was like, "No, like you've been alive probably a couple times more than I have, and you've been through a lot more, and you're smoking for a reason. I'm not going to come in here and tell you what to do. I just want to know why you're smoking." And he was so blown away by like me not telling him what to do. It was still horrifying. He was still absolutely brutal to me and mean and rude and terrible. But he asked for me the next time he came in, which I was like, no, 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 I'm not here. I'm not here. I'm not going to talk to him. And I ended up because he had what are called chronic stasis ulcers, but wounds on his legs that had to be dressed. He was coming in all the time, and I had to go see him every time because he kept asking for me, and it was maddening. And then I was gone for a couple weeks, and then I was back again just because of how the schedules worked out. And he asked for me, and I was like, of course, the first day I'm back, I have to go see him again. And he said, guess what? I quit smoking. And I was like, what? Like, what? I was like, why did you quit smoking? And he's because you didn't tell me to. I was like, okay, great. He said, I didn't do it for you. And I was like, okay, that's fine. That's totally fine. You did it for you, and that's amazing. You just did the hardest thing there is to do, and you did it yourself. And I just told him how great he was. And that really got me. That was a great first experience. That was one of my very first rotations, realizing that I am not going to tell people what to do and just have them go home and do it. And that the best way I can help people is to give them space to figure it out for themselves and let them know that I believe in them and that I will put up with them and it works out in the end. So when you're working with someone who themselves is difficult or is going through a difficult time, um, things I said all the time, I can't possibly understand what you're going through. People all the time, I understand what you're going through. No, you don't. You do not understand what they're going through. Even if you went through exactly the same thing as them, you're a different person and you have a slightly different situation. So I just said over and over again, I'm so sorry. I don't know what you're going through right now, but just know that I'm here with you. Or I can't imagine how hard this is for you right now. Please let me know if there's any questions I can answer. I'd always, what I was willing to do. I wouldn't offer like, tell me anything you want because I'm not going to do that. So just some starter things, just, be there, ask people like, how is this going for you? What is this like? And then just one more tip, memorize a whole bunch of nice, vague things to say. Wow, that sounds really terrible. I can't even imagine. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, that's dreadful. Just have like a million of, I could go on for probably an hour and a half of little phrases that you can kind of fill in with when people say that something terrible happened. Because as a doctor, people aren't seeing you because life is working out for them. They're seeing you because something terrible happened, right? Or because they're sick or because they're miserable or something. And if you act like you care, you're going to hear it all. So, yeah. Natasha, go ahead.
Dr. Robin, in your presentation, I noticed you talked a lot about trying new things. So I was wondering, because as you go through life, you're bound to accumulate more commitments as you go on. So how can you reconcile those two parts of life? Because they're bound to get in the way of each other at times.
Excellent question. Definitely start accumulating commitments. Be able to say no to commitments too, which is really, really hard to do. Be able to walk away from things and always look at what matches with your values. Are you doing something because you should? Are you doing something because you want to? Are you doing something because it is important to you? And sometimes we just end up doing more than we can. That's just life. When I was taking care of two small children, I had my own practice, and then I had multiple strokes just to make it more exciting. I was doing way more than I could. It was just way too, and there was nothing, I wasn't going to throw my kids under a bus or something, right? But in general, you have to be willing to get rid of things. So I actually did a leadership program a few years ago. It was amazing. It was a full year. We had 4 weekend retreats and we had tons of homework. It was like being in school, but really, really great. School's really great too. And at the beginning, I made this big mind map. I don't know if you guys have done mind maps. I love mind maps. I can dump my brains out on the whole thing. And I brought it in and I was like, I'm doing a lot of stuff I don't want to be doing. I need to figure out how to get out of it. And that was actually what I did for most of the leadership program was eliminate things. At the time, I was the medical director of a free clinic. I was doing a lot of advocacy work for Hunger Free Colorado and public speaking. Was actually involved in the legislative committee for the Colorado Academy of Family Physicians. I'd actually just helped make a bill that we got passed, which was great. That was going to help a lot of patients. So I did like all this stuff, and I needed to like not anymore. And by the end of that year, I had everything off of there except for my own little practice, and I actually felt really guilty and scared. Especially when, as our last meeting, we were supposed to sit down as a small group and talk about what we accomplished as leaders. And I ended up being with the person in charge of the program, who I thought very highly of, and 3 people who were like, I became this amazing thing and changed the world and saved millions, all sorts of, and I was like, I didn't do anything. I got out of everything. And I'll never forget the woman in charge of that. She said, this is wonderful. This is exactly what you needed to be doing, because you needed to make yourself available for the next thing that you're supposed to be doing. And being given that like grace of being able to say like, you're not supposed to be doing that, and that's okay, helped me immensely. And then a year later, we had COVID. I sold my practice, and then I was again like, I don't know what I'm gonna like really get. And then now I'm teaching on a platform called OutSchool, which I love, and I have my own business. I have a pre-med program for kids. It's also human biology for kids, which I love. And I'm also just really involved in my kids' lives and doing a lot of other things. And now I found my direction like for the rest of my life. And I would have never thought that I wanted to teach, and I wanted to mentor, and I wanted to create and do the things that I do now. But I love it. And if I had not said no to things, I would have never been able to say yes to the new things that came along. So learning how to walk away from things is really hard. Actually, there was a woman who was the head of Hunger Free Colorado who taught me how. She said, like, you can just, it's not your responsibility to find your successor. In most things, you just leave. It's someone else's job. It's not your job to always take care of everything. And of course, for my own practice, it was my job. Like, that was my practice. But for a lot of things, you can say, my time here is done. I'm giving this opportunity to someone else. And of course, fulfill your commitments. Don't just walk away from them. But when your time is done, your time's done, and that's okay. Does that kind of answer that question? Is it Ethan next? Ethan, go ahead.
So how much physics, I wanted to know how much physics is actually used in medicine, like with physics
Don't
research.
tell anyone, not very much. The thing with all of it is, for medicine, and specifically, you put it all together to this level where you don't use it directly, but it all goes to inform you, because once you get beyond chemistry and biology and physics, you discover they're the same thing, which is really amazing and mind-blowing and shocking. And so that's why you need to learn all of it. And at the same time, I don't have to like calculate trajectories and stuff anymore. But I'm glad I did, because now I understand, for example, how muscles work. So that's how it is. Now, I think we're at time. Caleb, am I able to take another question or two, or are we at time?
Yeah, if you still have time, we can take just maybe a few more questions. It'd be nice to end by at least 7, but we can take a few more questions if you're still available.
I can give short answers too, actually. It's hard to believe I can actually give a short answer, but sometimes I can. Devin, go ahead.
Yeah, so, Dr. Ruben, I think I heard you said God for a few times. Do you believe in God?
I do, but that does not mean everyone has to. I don't usually talk about it, but it is something that has been very important to me in my life. And again, having your values align with what you do is really important. So whatever your values are, make sure that what you're doing aligns with those values. Caleb, I think you're the only other hand.
I just had a question regarding like work-life balance, because I've noticed a lot of doctors are like working a lot, and I was wondering what can you do to manage that work-life balance when you become a doctor?
So part of it is it's going to be a lot better for you all than it was for me. Because I came into it when being a doctor was a calling, and you were supposed to actually give up your entire life for it. I think partly because back then it was only 15% women, and it was mostly men who just were a doctor. That was their life. and then their wives and kids didn't even see them. And now we have a mix of different kinds of people and different kinds of lives, and men or women, they want to know their families. They want to have time with their friends. They want to, it's a very different quality of medicine. And I was right at that tipping point. My medical school class was 50% male, 50% female, and like actually. And so I kind of came into that tipping point where all the older doctors were still, you should give up your entire life for this. We actually had to take off our wedding rings so people wouldn't know if we were married or not. We were supposed to be this blank slate. We were professionals. We didn't have family. We didn't have friends. We didn't have a life. We didn't have hobbies. We were just doctors, the doctor. You guys are coming into a new world. So that's part of it. But the other thing is, again, setting those boundaries and saying, I need to take care of myself. I need my relationships. The average, I think, full-time for a doctor is like 60 to 70 hours a week. There's 168 hours a week. So you choose what you do with the rest of them. So, but we are at 7 o'clock for you guys, 8 o'clock where I am. So I know we should be ending.
All right, so does anyone have any final questions for Dr. Robin before we move on? Any final questions? Going once, going twice? All right, if not, then thank you so much, Dr. Robin, for this incredible workshop. And I know all of us learned lots and lots and lots from your presentation. And I would like to share with you a certificate of appreciation. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you so much. That is so sweet of all of you. I really appreciate it.
For sure.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. And I would also like to mention, Dr. Robin was mentioning about her classes. She teaches on a platform called OutSchool. I'm going to put a link here, and she has all sorts of really great classes, recurring classes from Thursday to Saturday, mornings, afternoons. I've taken several of her classes over the years, and every single one is packed with information and quality, just like her workshop tonight. So if your schedule allows, definitely recommend checking them out. And if not, she also offers her curriculum, which she mentioned. So definitely check those out if you're interested in medicine and other avenues. So thank you so much,
thank you,
Dr. Robin.
Thank you very much. Well, it was lovely to spend time with all you. I appreciate all the questions, and you were a great audience. That participation makes a huge difference. So thank you very much. And I will step out so you can finish whatever else you need to do. Thank you so much.
All right,
bye.
Thank you, Dr. Robin. And before we adjourn the meeting, I have one very important, exciting announcement, and that's that last Sunday was the USA Gavel Club's prepared speech competition. And although Claire couldn't join us tonight, she was our club's representative, and Gavel Clubs from all across the US were competing. And I'm excited to announce that Claire won first place in the USA Gavel Club's competition. So congratulations, Claire. If you are watching the recording, congratulations on behalf of the entire FLGC. But her journey doesn't stop there, because she will be competing at the International Speech Contest for Gavel Clubs, and that will be coming up on January 18th, 2025. So Claire, we wish you the best of success. And this is a great way to close the year, because now our club has won 2 out of the 3 competitions offered, and William won the table topics competition earlier in October, won first place, and now Claire has won first place for the national speech competition. So congratulations to both of you. And while winning competitions is exciting, what really matters most is that all of you have put in lots of persistence, time, and effort into improving your public speaking and leadership skills. And I know every single one has experienced tremendous personal growth this year, and I'm excited to continue growing in 2025. So before we adjourn, does anyone have any questions, comments, or feedback about tonight's meeting? Please open your mic and share your thoughts. Stephen?
Okay, thank you so much, Caleb. It's my 3rd time attending your meeting. It's so amazing. Every time I really enjoyed it so much with from each of you. And especially Caleb, you are really brilliant. You are so cool. And I still remember the first time I met you through another Toastmasters club. So cool. I remember just you joined it once, but finally I did meet you anymore. Hopefully, you could visit the join the under Toastmasters as well. We could meet you more frankly. Anyway, and you guys are really great. And even most of you are high school students, or middle school students, or even just university students. But you guys are really great. I like to learn so much with each of you. Thank you so much, Caleb. It's a wonderful meeting. It's a wonderful club. It's hopefully there could be more guys globally could join your group and attend your meeting. Thank you so much, Caleb. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you for coming from across the other side of the sea. And if you know anyone who would really benefit, definitely share this club with them. And we are very, very grateful that you have been enjoying the meeting. So definitely keep coming and enjoying. So does anyone have any further final questions about the meeting or anything? All right, then, if not, at 7:05 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'd like to officially adjourn this meeting. Thank you everyone for coming. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we will see everyone back here in January 8th in the new year 2025. So thank you everyone for coming. See you all next week, and if anyone has any questions about the program, please stick around and we'll be happy to answer them. So thank you everyone for coming, and have a great new year.
Oh, yeah.
You.
All right, bye everyone.